Hello, everybody. Welcome, Blender heads and CG Cookie fam. Welcome to today's stream. I have Lampel with me today. Lampel, how you doing?
Pretty good. What's up?
Not too much, not too much. Been looking at some, well, your incredible artwork. Lampel, you have incredible artwork, but I mean the members who have submitted. Thank you all for doing that, by the way. I think you got it in on the 24th, so you gave us Monday and today to like critique those and get our notes together. So thank you for that. I didn't see any late submissions, so that's very courteous of you. I appreciate it. Yeah, we've got several to look at today. Very good ones too. I'm excited to talk about them. There wasn't. If anyone watched the Blender Today stream yesterday, I didn't put any notes from that one. None of it was terribly new information, in my opinion. The colored wireframes is kind of cool, but overall, kind of I would say a smaller day in the development side. At least not flashy. But anyway, that's kind of fun. So yeah, I suppose we'll just get right into it with the critiques today, since we do have several, and some of them might get long-winded if I don't control myself. So let's get started then with the first one from Thomas Lappies. Correct me if you're here. Also, if you are here, I wonder if you can just like make yourself known whenever we're critiquing yours. Just say like, hello, I'm here. As always, if you have questions, let us know with the Q tag. Remember, there, if you are unfamiliar with the question asking system, then look at the question mark above the text box wherever you type. That'll tell you. So yeah, questions are welcome. And let's see, Lampel, you're starting with this one, I believe, right?
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, take it away.
Talk about the jungle. So this is really good. The first thing that kind of like pops out to me is as good is the lighting, in the sense that like there's a few other nature renders that we'll look at today, and they're really hard to light well, because when you think about it, like you pretty much only have like a sun to work with. Like there's not a lot of like things that you can do. But if you light it wrong, it all kind of like mashes together and looks very like blobby and just like a giant mess. But this is like sectioned out in like different layers, and it looks really good. So I think that's like one point of like it's off to a good start.
Agreed.
I think the things that could be improved are the tree. To me, looks kind of like plastic. It doesn't look like a very natural bark. I think either going in and like actually sculpting in some like really rough bark, or using a displacement texture or something and really like popping that out would help a lot, and also have it be a little bit less like shiny and yeah. I don't know. Does it look a little plastic to you?
I do agree with you. When I go to the next image, which is the clay render and the kind of wireframe mixture, I agree that the surface of the tree geometrically seems
very
smooth. When it could, and then combined with the texture, I do agree. It's just got this plastic kind of look versus I wonder if there's a specular, like a specular layer on top where maybe it doesn't need that. But yeah, to your point, I do agree.
Yeah. Could be. Yeah, beyond that, I think there's only a few other things. So like the moss on the tree is like in like these like really distinct patterns that kind of look like worms crawling up the side. And to me, it just didn't seem very natural. And so either maybe like spreading that out a bit, or maybe making like a gradation between moss and not moss would help a bit.
Yeah.
And then let's see, a minor thing is you could add a water line along the water, so it's like it's darker kind of where it waves up, and the rest of it is kind of like dried out. And I think that would make it kind of stand out, because it's hard to tell where the water starts and stops, even looking at it pretty closely. And so that would be kind of cool.
Yeah.
And then lastly, everything is a little bit dark. And so if you did bring that up a bit, I think on the next slide I have a comparison.
Yes, I got that.
Did you look at that? Okay, cool. So I just brought that into Photoshop and brought that up, and you can see the scopes or the histogram on the top right. And on the top one, it's like all shoved over to the left, and it's even being like clipped. So there's like pure blacks.
Oh wow. Okay.
Um, and then bring those blacks up just a little bit, and then also brightening up the like midtones sort of, and bringing that up really helps. And kind of spreading out that histogram up to the right a bit more just helps things like pop, and it helps it feel a little bit more natural, and you're getting more use out of the pixel information that you have there. But beyond that, the only other little thing that I thought would be cool would be putting like a little animal character or something, which is probably outside the scope of what you were trying to do. But on that little branch that like goes over the river, there's the bright spot of the bush behind it. And if you like silhouetted like a little mouse guy or something like sitting there, I just thought that would look super cool, and kind of help like frame the composition, or like that would just be a good place to put a character. Not that you have to, but I think it would look pretty sweet.
I like that. I like that. So as I've been looking at this, I keep thinking, the more I analyze it, the more I see detail that Thomas, you've addressed, and you've added like small little things like leaves in the water, or the rocks to me read very, very well. I love all the moss on the left side bank, as well as the moss on the tree. I like that you added that detail. I agree with Jonathan that it could be maybe a little less like isolated. Like it's a hard cutoff on where there's moss and where there's not moss. So I feel like a little bit more bleed could help. But the more I look at the image, the more I realize like how much you put into it. So that's a big thumbs up from me. It's hard to make a nature scene like this because there's so many elements. With that, you brought up the water, which I'm glad you did. Something about the water doesn't feel real. Like it's missing like some depth. I don't know if the water's like too crystal clear. Maybe the reflections are too low, but like you said, I think a water line would help. But yeah, I wonder if the reflections, my bet is that the reflections are a little bit low, because from that angle, I feel like a creek is far more reflective than it is transparent from this specific viewing angle. So anyway, I feel like that's possible. But one thing I wanted to ask you, Jonathan, if you got this feeling. So the floor, the majority of the scene kind of looks more jungly, with like brighter colors, very vibrant greens, and then the background, and then the tree on the right, the big kind of evergreen looking tree on the right, they kind of seem like different forest ecosystems, like where one's a jungle, and then the darker greens, more evergreenish type bushes, maybe feels like it's not the same environment. But I don't know. Do you? I feel like you're in nature more than me. Do you agree with that?
Interesting. I didn't get that. That didn't like stand out to me. Though I guess I am in a place where those two kind of like clash all the time.
Right.
Where we have lots of evergreen trees, but we also have some jungle and like deciduous
that makes sense.
Right next to there. So I don't know. It could work.
Yeah. Okay. I'm with you. I guess I was on the fence. So if you've seen it, then I completely buy that.
But that's a great thing to think about, though. That's perfect.
Oh, right. Yeah. I guess my
like,
my thought was, if like I can do this sometimes if I'm working on an environment like that, just grab any generic like forest HDRI and throw it in the background without sometimes thinking if like they match up, so to speak. But yeah, overall, I'm thoroughly impressed with this, Thomas. I don't think I've ever attempted such a lush forest scene before, but I know you have, Lampel, and it's a lot of work.
It's a ton of work, and it looks really good.
Yeah, excellent. But yeah, great stuff, Thomas. That's a fun one to start out with. For the most part, this is in the order, by the way, in which they are submitted. A little bit of rearrangement, because the way we're doing this is we're kind of splitting the critiques. So like I'll do one, and then Lampel back and forth. So we can kind of focus, and the other one supports with some other thoughts. So anyway, the next one from Nathan Foster is Kylo Ren, or it's not Kylo Ren's lightsaber. That's wrong. My fault. It's not Kylo Ren's lightsaber, but he referenced Kylo Ren's lightsaber, so I've got a wrong title. It's a lightsaber. And from Nathan, you mentioned the problem I have with this material. I was trying to match the material on Kylo Ren's lightsaber. Thus, I would like to add wear and tear to the metal, scratches, and a heat stain in particular. The thing I run into, however, is I can't find a way to make it look right. And if we look at the next slide, this is the image of Kylo Ren's saber next to yours, and your head's in the right space in that the next step, I think, of the creation process or refinement process, and this is, I'm sorry, the name is wrong. It says Nathan's. Hope the rest of the slideshow isn't totally butchered, but is this wear and tear side of material creation. So you're aware of that. Now, when you say, I'm not sure how to make it look right, I guess I'm tempted to walk you through how I would think about it, like how I would go about the wear and tear process. And you're in luck because we have a lot of this on CG Cookie that you can watch, like training that we use to cover this. And first of all, it's about edge detection. So you're going to want to detect your edges in the material to change both the color and the like material quality sometimes, depending on the situation. Like with Kylo Ren's saber, to me, the black portion, the majority is black, and it kind of reads like a painted metal. Whereas on the edges, you can see that the color is lightened and it's more of a metallic color. And so this is because by the nature of hard surface things, like they're the first to get touched and to get rubbed more than the rest of the surface. So the color or the paint gets scratched off, or in the case of like an all metal object, it gets more beaten up and scratched. So you can see that evidenced in the image here. If you follow along the edges, you can see that they're shinier, they're brighter in color, more of a gold in color compared to the black. And yeah, as you follow along the entire saber, you see that happen on all the edges. This is a great example of this like little clip. Maybe it attaches to the belt or something, but it's a black metal object with bright gold edges. So yeah, that kind of edge detection is going to be really important to make your lightsaber look a similar age or material quality as Kylo Ren's saber over here. And I'm going to list you some training that you can watch for more like detailed walkthroughs. But let's see. The other thing you mentioned was the heat marks, which I thought was a great like thing to notice. And I might actually just run through that in Blender real quick to show you how I would approach that. Yeah, that should only take a couple minutes. Maybe I'll show you real quick. Not the whole material, but just how I would go about isolating the burn marks in the very top. So yeah, I'm going to do that actually. Just jump over to Blender for a couple minutes. Just a default scene, and I'm going to delete the cube and instead add a, what are we adding? Cylinder. All right, I'm going to tab into edit mode, scale up. So this is sort of representative, what happened there, of a lightsaber like this. All right, split my view. And this one, I'm going to turn off overlays. I'm going to use cycles just because it's more reliable in my opinion. And so I'm just going to make the right one a render viewport and the left one a shader graph. And we'll add a new material to this. Let's start rendering. And I don't need that other, well, I'll leave it, whatever. Add a world material real quick. And I think this is the one I like. Okay, so we've got the basics in here for what we need. I'm going to shade smooth. Although since it's such low geometry, we actually do need a little bit of, in the normals, I'm going to auto smooth. There we go. All right, so now to create that discoloration from the heat of the saber, which I think is a great idea, is to add a texture, gradient texture. Where's that at? Here we go. All right, Control T to add our mapping coordinates and a mapping node as well. Now when we plug that into the material, you can see what the gradient is kind of doing, although I'm not going to use generated. Let's use our object coordinates instead. All right, now we can see the gradient is just facing the wrong direction, right? We want it to go up and down along the length of the cylinder. So in the mapping node, I can just rotate, I believe it's in Y, 90 degrees. Yeah, there we go. So now it's facing up and down. I can move with the Z location. No, I can't do that. Is it the Y location? It's the X location, sorry. So we're going to move that up, and now I've kind of isolated the upper like what is it, fifth or something of the cylinder. And from here we can add a converter color ramp. And this is where I'm going to add the discoloration. If we look back at the reference, you know, it kind of starts as the black material, then it goes to a gold, which I'm kind of interpreting as the paint being scraped or burned off. And then I don't know if galvanized is the right term for this, but when metal gets discolored, it kind of has this purpley bluish rainbow color. And then finally, like a regular metal gray. So then we can just emulate that here. We'll make the first one kind of a darker gray like this. Add another flag for purple, or is gold next? Something like that. Control click to add another flag. We'll make this one. I already forgot the color scheme. Oh, that's purple. That's right. I'm not making them super saturated, just barely saturated, maybe a little darker than that. I wonder if Nathan's here, by the way. If you are here, say hello. I don't think he is. Hopefully I'll watch this later then. All right, the last one I'm going to make white as kind of like a chrome. And then we'll just space the flags out appropriately. I think maybe an ease pattern or an ease interpolation will be a little bit better. Maybe the purple needs two flags, something like this. All right. And this is just an example, like it's the base of the discoloration. I would definitely prefer to add like a noise to break it up. We can see that in the reference, but I'm going to plug that into the base color, crank metallic all the way up to 1, specular off. Now let's see what that looks like. How about we take the roughness down to like 0.1. Anisotropic all the way up. Okay, now we're getting into the ballpark of what that discoloring, how I would approach the discoloring. And maybe we can stretch in the Z-axis. Anyway, you can play with this. I could take too much time on it, but anyway, it's a little too like harsh of a fall off. Maybe I could go back to like what about a B-spline, something like that. Anyway, yeah, so I think this is the beginnings of that discoloration effect, just using a simple gradient texture. Hope that helps, because I don't think we've taught anything quite exactly like that, but hopefully that's a... What'd you say, Lampel?
Nathan is here.
Oh, Nathan, hello.
Sweet.
Thanks for saying hello. Awesome work getting started on this lightsaber. I think one of my original notes was going to be like add more bits and stuff to the model. Like if you can see in Kylo Ren's saber, all these little, I think there's like a circuit board down here at the bottom. There's much more fine detail in Kylo Ren's lightsaber than like the classic lightsabers from the older movies, the original trilogy. And so when I looked at the older ones, you are actually very close to that style. There aren't as many little tiny bits and stuff. But is there anything else? Let's see. I think I have a couple, like a list of notes. Along with edge detection, so dust and grime, I think, is another effective tool that you can use to use either, well, really ambient occlusion is the best mask to add some dust and grime and dirt inside the crevices where it would naturally collect. Oh yeah, the base. I think if we look up a lightsaber real quick, was it Luke's lightsaber? See if we can find a big image. There was one specifically I liked earlier. Maybe it's this one. Ooh. Oh, nice. They have blueprints of this thing. I didn't realize that. I'm looking for a big image. I don't think this is what I want. Sorry, there's a picture of the original. Oh, it must be this one. Yeah, this is the one. Open image and new tab. All right, so if we look closely, from a distance, it kind of looks like just a typical metal, which currently you've got, it's a metallic material, but it's absolute basic metallic material. Whereas if we look closely at the original one, there's this really subtle brushed metal texture going on. And I would highly encourage you to do that, because since these models, even this original one, is a pretty simplistic model, like it doesn't have all the gadgets and gizmos in Kylo Ren's saber. Um, since it is such a simple model, I would recommend upping the detail level in the material with something like a brushed metal. I think that would look really nice as your base metal and kind of build everything else off of that. Um, yes, an HDRI environment, you saw me load that up in the quick example. And the reason I wanted to point that out is currently you have the Saber in just sort of like a white room, it looks like. And the problem with that is you don't have enough to reflect to really illustrate that this is metal. Uh, so I would highly recommend you use an HDRI for that kind of thing. If you're going for a studio light setup, very distinct light planes or area lights so that they are caught. There's high contrast in the reflections is what I'm trying to get across. To me, I think it's just a lot easier to go with an HDRI. You'll get all your reflective information. Yeah, okay. And then the courses I wanted to recommend, which I think are very relevant, are the texture weapons in Blender and Substance Painter. Lampel did that course, and it's right up this alley about texturing weapons with grunge and wear and tear and stuff like that. So I recommend that. Better edge and cavity masking with cycles. That is a newer lesson from Thibaut, and he goes over explicitly how to detect edges and isolate crevices. Yeah, so that's what you're looking for in this kind of material. The brushed metal shader forge lesson, and then shading the sci-fi helmet. That's a little bit of a deeper dive into maybe overly complex now that I look back on it, but a much more complex wear and tear sort of metallic material. And yeah, that's all I had. Did you have any other points, Lampel?
No, the only other thing that I think would be a pretty quick win here would be when you're adding that stuff in cycles. If you're using the newer version of 2.79 or 2.8, throw in a bevel shader in the normal, and that'll just like immediately help that look better.
Oh, good point. Where it's like it's really sharp right now. All the edges are super sharp.
Yeah, and you don't even have to go in and add actual like bevel geometry, since like it is a fairly sharp thing. You don't need big bevels, so yeah, just add that shader in and it should look good.
That's a great call. Yeah, very true. All right, well, good work, Nathan. Thank you for submitting, and we'll go on to the next one now, which is an Hourglass project by CG Cookie Dough. I know you're here, and I think Lampel, you can take it away.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, say hi if you're here. So he said, I wanted something that is original and looks good. I played with the texturing a bit to try to get something that looked nice. The idea came to me when I was teaching my little brother how to do Blender, which is awesome. It was going to be just an hourglass, but then I wanted it to be something more, a little bit imitating, looking at the other people's artwork, or intimidating. But I think it's good to have feedback when I'm just beginning too. Yeah, definitely. And this is a fun beginner project where it doesn't need to be overly complex. It still looks cool. You have something that's like interesting, and I think it's awesome. In terms of feedback, I think just like with the lightsaber, an HDRI would definitely help with reflections. You have a sky there, and I think it looks procedural, and that's good for like the background that kind of like fits the aesthetic. But the reflections and like lighting would definitely be improved with. You could probably find like a desert one on HDRI Haven or something like that, and put that in. And then a few other things, like just a few small things that would really help like boost the like visual detail or the visual quality, are adding like waves to the sand. Either you could like sculpt them in, or add a displacement modifier with like a wave texture, or even just add that in the material and just have that go along that those sort of like peaks of the sand, and also add like grains to the sand shader. I think, Kent, do you have a snow material in Shader Forge?
I do, yeah.
Okay, yeah, if you take the snow material, and then instead of using like subsurface scattering and translucency, just get rid of that part of it, and then make it sand colored, that should be pretty perfect.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
I think that would look really good. And then the big thing is I'm not really sure what's going on in the background, and it seems really confusing. I am realizing now that I'm looking at this that the large hole is like another part of a larger hourglass.
Oh, yeah.
So I think we're seeing hourglasses inside of hourglasses, which is like a really cool idea.
Oh.
But it took me a really long time of looking at this in order to see that. So if there's any way to make that more obvious, I think that would be cool, because I really didn't realize that until just now.
I'm seeing it. Yeah, so that would make the grains of sand, the big square like column in the back, like several. It looks like grains of sand, but on a much larger scale. That's an
Yeah.
interest. I like the concept. Yeah.
So like now it makes sense, but it's just something about how it's communicated doesn't hit you right away. Like it's not obvious.
Yeah.
And not everything needs to be obvious,
Mhm.
but it comes across as a little bit odd at first.
Right. I think it's a solid idea. Now the challenge is how to execute that idea. I like the Easter egg part to where like we looked at it. Oh, now I think I get it. I think there's a reward in not, like you said, not being too obvious.
Mm-hmm.
But something that confuses me is it looks like there's another smaller hourglass directly behind the big grains of sand, and I kept looking at that like, is it falling in a, like, what is that thing? But like maybe remove that one entirely, and then it'll be more clear that those are grains of sand in a bigger thing. Anyway, just like kind of tidying up the message or the visuals, I guess.
Yeah.
Story, yeah.
Or maybe they like all of the grains of sand could be in hourglasses.
I like the idea a lot. Like it's very intriguing. I think that's like a big thing going for it right now.
Yeah.
Wow, cool. Yeah. I don't
Good.
think I have anything, unless you were not done.
I did have a point that it would be cool to sculpt some like buildup around the objects that are buried, as if they'd been sitting there for a while. But now realizing what the concept is, the sand is going to be like falling down and like spreading over it, kind of as it is right now.
Mm-hmm.
So it makes sense. But if it was just like sitting in the desert for a long time, then you'd want to sculpt some stuff like around those areas.
I would agree. Even I feel like even if it's been there, there would be some sort of indentation. Like it wouldn't be purely intersection without any interaction.
That's true. It would kind of like build up on that right side and kind of like behind it,
Right.
as it like blocks it from going down.
Right. I like. It looks like you're using kind of You're using a procedural, like sand splotchy texture on the bottom of this hourglass, and and like it's blending in with the sand. It's a cool idea. The execution, I think, could be like maybe a little bit of a bump map or something to kind of perfect it. But I really like the idea and that attention to detail you're putting into it. Yeah, I think I'm intrigued. I think this is a really cool idea. Just polishing off some things, I think would be a big help. Maybe from CG Cookie Dough, maybe if I made the name be Hourglassception, then it would be more obvious. Well, I mean, we came. It looks like we deduced the right, visual, which I think is a success. If you named it Hourglassception, I think that might be a little too obvious. I don't know. What do you think, Lampel?
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Um,
I like when the name's a little bit more vague and then like the picture tells the story.
right. Agreed. You're right there. I feel like you're 90% there. It's just fine tuning little things. But I think a little bit of a little bit of compositing would help, like treatment, standard stuff like a subtle vignette or some color, just color treatment, what am I trying to say? Color ramp. I don't know what I'm trying to say, but color tone mapping kind of thing. Anyway, I think that's it. Yeah, really good work, CG Cookie Dough, and especially for a beginner. I feel like I don't see too many visual ideas being expressed. A lot of time it's just create a car or create this thing, and there's not too much more behind it. But I like that this is an interesting idea. From Mikal, I think it would be nicer if sand was falling on the hourglass in front. I mean, that's a good idea too. Kind of make the falling glass a little more prominent, a little more featured. Yeah, I like that idea. All right, cool. I think we'll go on to the next one. Keep up the good work. And this is a savage character by Irenel. I just saw you comment, so I know you're here. Really
Nice.
nice work. We had several characters this critique session, so we are going to be talking a lot about characters, and they're all pretty good. So this one, I really like the level of detail that you're achieving, especially in like the tattoo. I can't. I wonder how high resolution, how what resolution your textures are if you're going with like 4K or 8K, because it seems like it would need pretty high texture resolution, but that level is very impressive and very yeah, just high quality, I guess, in general. The quality of fabric on the clothes, on the pants especially, I think is pretty believable. The way that it bunches around the tightened ropes. Perhaps there could be a little bit more bunching, isolated along with the wrinkles. I mean, you've got it vertically, like we have the wrinkles going vertically, but I'd like to see a little bit. Let me see if I can, whoops, put my pointer on. So like we've got it pretty much straight in silhouette, right? Like we don't see much bunching like this, if you're following my pointer. So that's what I'm kind of talking about. A little bit of bunchingness, like horizontally outward from the mesh around the ropes. I think that would help. Oh yeah, so let me read actually some like background on what you're looking for. What this project comes from. I wanted to study more human anatomy, practice more digital sculpting and blocking out general forms. Entire model was done from a polysphere, so feedback in this perspective would help me. Making perfect skin or realistic skin was one of the main objectives, and also wanted to practice more the lighting in the scene and tried to make good lighting environment for my character just so that it could simply pop. Hair cards were a complete nightmare. Beard, mustache, and eyebrows were entirely done. Beard, mustache, and eyebrows were entirely done after you watch my tutorial. So I hope it wasn't a complete nightmare after the tutorial, but I hope the tutorial helped a little bit. And I would like to get near to Raphael Grassetti. Well, that's you can't shoot much higher than him, and I think that's a good person to shoot for. Let's see. I'll try and cover a couple of them. You mentioned a perfect skin or realistic skin shader. That remains to be one of the most difficult things I've ever attempted in computer graphics. There's just so much that goes into believable skin. I think personally, because we see human faces every day, most of us, I would imagine. So we are inherently experts in what a realistic human should look like, and that's why when we watch visual effects where the characters don't read quite well, you don't have to be an expert digital artist to realize that just doesn't feel right. And so similarly with skin, if it's not perfect, every human can kind of tell. And in this case, there is an element of waxiness, which is a very common, I almost feel bad saying it, but it's such a common critique whenever anyone tries to attempt skin. But I guess because it's very common result to end up with. And for me, to break that down more, I think that there's I believe that there's subsurface involved. The closer I look, I believe you do have subsurface enabled. I don't see much evidence of like a red kind of backscatter. So like if you shine a flashlight up under your hand or something, like you'll see your fingers glow orange, and that orange color is obviously not your skin color. It's the underlying blood layers and fat and muscles that's underneath your skin that's giving that color. Currently, I don't see any evidence of that characteristic reddish kind of glow within the subsurface. So I'm not 100% sure if there is subsurface in here, but if there is, let me know. Ironell, I see you're in the chat, but there's also a very consistent specular layer across the whole model. It's not as broken up as I think it needs to be in order to read. Okay, so you do have subsurface on. I wonder if you're just putting subsurface like in the radius settings, if they're all set to 1, and so therefore it scatters white rather than like 1 in the red channel, 0.5 in the green channel, and then like 0.2 in the blue channel to get more of a reddish hue. But anyway, so there's a little bit of work to be done with the subsurface, but like frankly, that's one of the most difficult things to do. So don't feel bad or behind or anything. But the breakup in the specular, I think, would help a lot. The more you study skin, the more you'll see that there's varying degrees of specular. depending on where in the face, where on the body. Like there's just a big variety. Also with pore detail, that also is varying depending on where on the body it's appearing. So you can't really achieve a procedural skin material because the human skin's just a little too specific. It's too specific depending on the area. So anyway, considering how difficult all this is, you've done a pretty good job. You should feel really happy about it. It's you're just trying to do one of the harder things we've ever tried to do in computer graphics. So is there any other? I think I had some other notes. Let me see here. I've said all that. Okay, yeah, the waist garment. I think I used, that's not the right waist. That's a trash waist. I meant like your waist around your body. That right here is a little less defined than I think it should be. Like I'm not sure if it looks like it's leather, but it's like the edge is kind of rounded, so it doesn't look like a sharp cut garment. If it is leather, like the pattern's a little bit too broad, like the pore detail kind of the leather pattern should be smaller in scale. So I would spend a little more time on the waist garment just so that, I don't know, it reaches the level of everything else. Like there's no wrinkle detail in this one like there is in the pants. So it just feels undercooked, I guess, as a part of the model. A note about the anatomy. So the only word I could think is like a segmented anatomy, almost like an action figure, where it's obviously not fleshy. It's a plastic representation of a human anatomy. But currently, the forearm looks like there's a harsh cutoff between the upper arm and the lower arm, whereas like with human anatomy, it's much more interwoven and it's not so symmetrical or even on both sides. So I would just spend a little more time like trying to interweave your muscle anatomy together. Same thing with it's not quite this noticeable, but in the deltoid. Wait, what's the shoulder? This is the deltoid, right?
Yeah.
Okay. The deltoid too. There's like very sharp transition from muscle to muscle, whereas in between the transitions, it's more smooth and less defined. So it creates this like segmented look. But proportionally, it looks good. I would maybe move the arms backward a little bit, tilt his head forward. I think for a more natural pose, because currently he looks stiff. He looks, like rigid, like at attention soldier kind of thing. Whereas like I would recommend a much more relaxed kind of pose. Also, his hands being straight out, I think doesn't help. I like to put a little bit of bend in the fingers. For one, it also, I think it looks more natural and more believable, but also when you're rigging, you have a natural bend that the IK chain will inherit. When it's straight, you kind of have to, it can go wonky a little bit. If you're even planning on animating it. Let's see, anything else? The lighting, I think, is really good, actually. I did say, I think that's all I said. Lighting is dramatic and appealing. Perhaps could use a tiny bit more contrast. But I mean, that's a little bit of a preferential note. I think it's a pretty strong presentation in terms of lighting. And yeah, sorry, I'm looking at the chat. But yeah, overall, very good character. Just all these notes, just trying to push you further down the road, because this is a very, very, very good character. So keep up the good work. And yeah, Lampel, did you have any last notes?
No, and I'm not a character guy, so I learned a few things here, especially about the different areas having different amounts of specular. I never really thought about that, but that makes total sense. Especially since you can see like on his cheekbone, that looks like perfect.
Yeah.
Like,
agreed.
Right on. But then next to it on the ear, that doesn't look right at all.
Right.
But it's the same amount of specular, so okay. Yeah. Makes sense.
It's still like I so want to create the perfect human head in computer graphics. I've never done it, and you learn one little more nugget that like, the human inside the human ear is like, it gets waxy, right? Like you have earwax, so it creates a shinier surface of the skin compared to like the cheek, or inside the eye, it gets around the eye. Anyway, there's all kinds of details that, unlike other things in computer graphics, like if I'm creating a car, I don't think you can get away with not being so specific, but with a human bust, You just
Sure.
because of the nature of the thing, it's going to look imperfect if you don't pay a lot of attention. So yeah, that's it for this guy. Good work, Irinel. Next one, the Hydra
Hydra.
by John Sanderson. I think that's you,
Cool.
Lampel.
All right. So for the backdrop, I did this one last month following Zacharias Reinhardt's Hydra tutorial on YouTube. I was trying to imitate a fantasy style painting that you might see on the cover of a D&D manual or board game box art. Sort of not quite realism and not super stylized. As for the tutorial, the idea was to make the appealing image quickly and efficiently so the dragon heads are all linked objects with some repositioning to avoid making them look too repetitive. And the first thing I thought of when I saw this was definitely like board game box art.
Yeah.
Or just like those like cards that just have, some character on them. That this looks exactly like that. Like that's the vibe that it gives off. So I think you are definitely nailing that. And I wouldn't have necessarily guessed that they were linked either, especially with one having like the mouth open and the other one having it closed. I didn't really think about these being like just total copies of each other. So that worked out well.
Agreed.
I think in terms of notes, the material on the horns feels a bit odd. Almost like has like plastic wrapped around it or something.
Huh, yeah.
And I think a couple things give it that impression. Like it's a little bit too shiny and like too ivory-ish and less bone-like. But also the texture is going pretty much vertical all the way along the horn instead of following the curve of it. So I'm guessing that it's like a procedural texture. So what you could do is you could still probably use the same procedural texture, but unwrap the UVs for it. And that way, make sure that when you unwrap the UVs, make the UVs straight, and then the texture will naturally follow along. I think that would help. And then the material on the face looks pretty good, but instead of it looking like scales, to me, it kind of looks like pockmarks or like indentations instead of scales. I'm not entirely sure what would be a great way to solve that other than maybe, I don't know, just finding a different texture that maybe has a gradient of displacement between the top and the bottom of the scale where the bottom like juts out more. But beyond that, I really like the lighting. It looks super cool. The back of them look very like plain, and with the depth of field and stuff, they just kind of turn into large noodles or I don't know. It's like a rolled loaf of bread or like something like a bunch of dough just kind of like sitting there.
I see what you mean, yeah.
But yeah, I don't know exactly what's missing there other than it just feels empty behind the heads. Yeah. That's what I got for that one.
Yeah, to your point, that was the biggest thing for me is the rest of the body did in combination. I think also that there seems to be a Z depth kind of like a mist pass or whatever that is quickly fading to like a light orangey sort of color, and it happens very quickly, and like immediately behind this main head it starts to fade, and especially on this body on the right side, like there's almost no detail compared to the head. There's so much awesome detail. This main head coming down from the top, like love the detail, love it, but then it quickly dissipates into nothing along the rest of the body. So I don't know if you can try and hide the rest of the body, like position the heads so that you see less of the rest of the body, or just spend a little bit more time like doing something more fully with the rest of the body. But I mean, yeah, that's
like taking those like red scales.
Oh yeah, true. Yeah,
making a pattern all the way back.
I wonder if they're missing. No, okay, they're not missing on the other ones, but they just stop sooner than they could. But yeah, I like the red scales a lot. That was a good note about the skin texture. Like some places it looks really good. I think on the eyebrows, like it reads pretty well, but then other places it definitely kind of loses the effect. But like you said, a gradient where the bottom juts out further than the top of each scale, I think that would be a good addition. And I didn't even notice the horns. That's a really good good eye for that. Yeah, that's good.
I think last point that I just looking at now, if the mouth being open is going to be like the main central part, then sculpting those like ridges kind of inside the mouth would look really good.
Very true. Very true. Concrescent says it kind of looks like a cheese puff Cheeto. I think for the body is that's a good description. But yeah, John, overall, like really, really good job. I too like that you went the repetition route, but like hidden repetition, because I didn't think twice about it being like an instance version of the head. So excellent work. Awesome. All right, so we'll go on to the next one then. What are we doing on time? Okay.
I think we're doing pretty good.
Yeah. So some
everybody
ice.
On the chat says Hail Hydra.
What'd you say?
Everybody in the chat says Hail Hydra.
Hail Hydra. Wait, what is that from? Is that from a?
That's from the Avengers, right?
Oh. Okay. That would explain why. I don't watch the Avengers. Yeah, I got a little burned out on the superhero movies.
That's fair. You watched Spider-Man though, right?
I did go see Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. I could not resist that one. Okay, so yeah, on to the next one. Icicle Branches animation. I see John Sanderson. You said thanks. Thank you, John, for submitting. Keep up the good work, sir.
Yeah.
So Saber, I'll read his description or his background. My goal was a realistic tree render. All my textures are completely procedural, and my HDRI texture was the only thing I did not make. I want to be able to. I won't be able to attend the live stream, but if this gets featured, I would love to rewatch the stream and receive your critiques. Okay, so Sam Bear is not here. That is cool. I'm specifically looking for input on the snowy ice material on the tree. Do you have any ideas to make this more realistic? I have two meshes, one for the tree and a larger one for the ice on top of each other with a separate material for each. The general layout and composition, this is one thing I don't spend much time on as I was eager to finish the scene. Any input on improving the appeal while keeping it relatively simple? Any other input you may have improving the project? So if I remember correctly, which I think is really cool, is this is inspired by the live stream we did a few weeks ago. And I'd love to see someone taking that and running with it and doing something more complex. So great and really, really good execution. Even you did an animation. So let's watch that real quick. So the animation I love. I mean, I want to say, did you say you're a beginner too? I feel like you did. Anyway, maybe I didn't copy that part, but regardless of what stage you're at, this is, I think, extremely impressive work overall. Like you have this camera shake, kind of handheld. I think it looks handheld. Maybe it's just the shake of the branches themselves, but very, very close to like completely believable in my opinion. The biggest notes that I do have are the difference in contrast between the background and the foreground branches. So in the background, it looks like a much sunnier day with bright right here you can see blown out whites, and you have darker colors as well, like a big contrast difference. Whereas in the front, in the main branches, you don't have any bright whites, and so I would like to see more contrast there. If you rendered this out in layers, that could be pretty easy to accomplish. If you didn't, then maybe you can increase the intensity of the HDRI, but then use the light path node so that the camera sees the original lighting, but the scene experiences brighter lights. Whatever you need to do to get the foreground brighten up and match the contrast in the back. Also, I think this is prime for some depth of field, like kind of a macro shot. So I would bump that up a little bit. That would look so nice as it rotates around.
I think he has a bit, but it could be stronger.
Oh, you're right. You're right. It looks like he's focused on. Yep, you're totally right. There is some. The main, like the closest branches are blurred out.
But he could go over the top with it and have it look really sharp.
Yeah, it would be nice since it is so bright in the background if like you could get really like bright specular in certain areas, and then when the depth of field takes over, like you get nice bokeh effects around those bright areas. I think that would just make it feel like a crystalline kind of environment, very icy. The bit what I so you have this kind of, it looks like a melting effect. If you look close, there's like all these water droplets, which I like. I like the effect because the brightness of the background implies like the sun is out, it's melting away the snow. However, the rate at which the drops fall, it looks like it's raining. So I would slow that way down, the frequency way down, and only, a handful of drips throughout the animation, I think would be a little bit more believable. But I really like the effect. I like all of like the story you put into this simple scene. Really, filled that out a lot more. You asked about the material being realistic in and around the branches. I honestly don't think there needs to be much improvement there. I think it looks really good. Once you have the lighting be a little bit stronger and more contrast, I think it'll read well. But as I stare at the ice, it looks completely believable in my opinion as we rotate around. Just the lighting is not quite bright enough. But yeah, I think that's all I had.
Yeah, I have a couple notes. One being on animation, which is awesome, and I like how you have all of the branches moving subtly. That looks really good. I think it could be a little more subtle though, and it seems like the point of rotation is a bit off. I don't know, Kent, if you agree with me, but it seems like the point of rotation is wherever you have the end of the stick, instead of like the base of the tree, which would be like behind you a bit. And so like the ones that are hanging down are kind of animating like this instead of like that, if that makes sense. Like if you look at the one on the left, it's not rotating how it would naturally, like the way that it's hanging.
Interesting. Yeah, I didn't even notice that. I see what you mean though.
But it's like dangling instead of being like held up by the tree branch that it's connected.
Right. I see it. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, that's a good point.
But if you like slow it down and make it even more subtle, you probably wouldn't even notice that at all.
Yeah.
So if they're just like barely moving, then it would still work. And then the other thing is with the icicles and the tree branch. So with the icicles, some of them are kind of shooting outwards, and they pretty much all need to be hanging straight down.
Yeah.
And if they're not, then they need to be all at a consistent angle instead of going in different directions, because it's always going to fall due to gravity or wind, one of the two. And then with the tree splitting, most of it looks really good. There's some of them where they kind of like create a curve instead of like shooting out one from the other, like the little off branches, because they generally don't fork quite like that.
I see what you mean.
But the one you have on the far right on the picture, where you have one that's like coming down and the other one like shoots out of it, that's like the perfect kind of angle.
Let's see. Wait, let me go in the picture. Oh, in the still frame, you mean?
Yeah, in the still frame.
Gotcha.
Yeah, so like the very far right, like that branch splits very well, and then the part in the middle where it has like the two that kind of like split off each other.
Right.
That looks unnatural.
Oh, I kind of see what you mean. It almost looks more like roots than like a tree branch, right? Like tree roots.
Yeah. So it's getting kind of like nitpicky, but I feel like if those things were solved, and maybe, I don't know, some of the ice buildup looks like a little bit thick as well.
Yeah.
But like with those things taken care of, like this could be like completely realistic.
Yeah, agreed.
Like,
I mean,
totally spot on.
Yeah, I agree. It's like the nitpicking is usually a good sign because like it's really close to being perfect. And that's how I feel about this. So let's see. Okay, no questions yet. I don't think we've had a single question today, which is fine.
Wow.
Let's see. All right, next one. Realistic Character by Pavel. I know you're in here, Pavel. Fantastic work. I don't know if you needed to hear that, but you probably know. You're coming along very well as a character artist in general. But this character that you're submitting to the realistic character course is just coming along super well. And I'll read your background. I want to know a way to model this type of haircut without getting too much pain on placing all of the separate dreadlocks. The second one is about how to texture high poly characters, because 8 kk of polygons is not something Substance Painter can handle. Do you know what kk is? Is that representative of like a million? 8 kk? 8,000,000?
Maybe.
Okay, I've never heard that before, but
That before.
maybe I'm assuming 8 million seems plausible for a character of this quality. It's not something Substance Painter can handle on my machine. I understand how to do a real-time version, bake normals and stuff, but interested in high poly texturing specifically. Paul says I'm totally here. And so yeah, like the hair specifically, starting out there, I mean, I think the hair looks pretty convincing right now. I'm wondering if you're saying that like getting the hair to this point was a big pain because you did them individually. And you know, Lampel, I couldn't really think of an easy way to make a dreadlock hair system without doing it so manually. Did you think of anything by chance?
Dreadlock? No. That'd be pretty tough.
Yeah, that would, I mean, you wouldn't necessarily have to do a hair system. Like you could make it possibly like solid body, or not solid body, but soft body, as far if you're talking about animation and how to set it up for animation. But sometimes like this stuff is just a pain. Like if you happen to see my old hair course from when I did long hair for a female, like it was extremely manual and hands-on. And that wasn't even like as individual as a dreadlock hair system. But it was more generic and it was still really hands-on. I don't know of a simple way to do very good hair, even dreadlocks. So I don't know. I might not have a.
It should be like, because it's not like that many things. Like if you just have, there should be some sort of physics system that works well with that, but it just not in Blender at least, and not in actually other softwares that I've seen.
Definitely not Blender.
Like a radius,
right? I mean, whatever they did for Tangled seemed to work brilliantly, but
yeah, true.
I don't know where that tech is. But yeah, as far as setting it up for animations, I won't do any dread characters. I mean, yeah, Pavel, if you're trying to animate it, then I mean, I don't know. You could. It just depends on how much animation you're doing. If you're like really close, if you're expecting an animation where you're really up close to the character, she's like whipping her head around and all the dreadlocks are realistically falling on each other, and the shoulders and stuff, that's going to be really tricky. But if it's like an action shot from further away, then you can probably fake a lot of it with like a cage mesh or something, like just to get a little bit of motion. But like dynamic hair is going to be a bit of a nightmare. Period. But like as far as the model, I think this looks great. I think adding a shader to this, and you could get completely to the finished hair result with the geometry you have now. A feature to add in Blender, maybe so. Like I know there's a lot of great tools for grooming hairstyles, like Ornatrix, Yeti. There's another one. What's it called? Oh shoot, it's for Maya. I forgot what it's called now.
Is it shaving a haircut or something like that?
Not shaving a haircut. That I feel like used to be a big deal back when I was in college, but I haven't heard anything about it recently. But is it hair? Oh man, I completely forgot. But it's another big one. Anyway, there's a lot of grooming tools I know for sure, but I don't know how the hair dynamic world is doing outside of like Tangled.
We need like a marvelous designer for hair where you can like just section it off and then just like flip one that way, flip one that way, and just call it good.
Yes, exactly.
It's so easy.
But Yukino asked a question. Congrats on being the first question today, I think. I forgot to upload my head model so far. Is it okay to tag you to get some feedback on afterwards? Yeah, sure. I'll remind me at the end of the stream if I sound like I'm gonna wrap it up. Let me know, and I'll jump over to that thread. Yeah, and if you want to submit that there, we'll take a look at it. An impromptu critique. Oh no, it looks like we've got another one. Quentin.
Another question?
Sorry, another submission that came in late.
Gotcha.
All right, cool. So yeah, the hair. I'm not really sure how to give you reliable advice on how to make that easier. Um, but the texturing stuff, I think we can talk about a little bit more. So when you ask, or when you state, I understand how to do a real-time version, bake normals and stuff, but I'm interested in high poly texturing. I kind of get the impression that you see a difference in them. Like real-time version is very different texture painting wise than high poly stuff. And in my experience, that gap it has grown smaller and smaller, has shrunk smaller and smaller to where now I don't think there is that much of a difference. And Lampel, I want to get your thoughts on this too. Where now I think the biggest difference between real-time characters and high poly texturing is like the poly count of the base mesh and the resolution size of the textures. But like the actual techniques to achieve the looks on each, I don't think are actually that different. What do you think, Lampel?
I think that's pretty spot on. Like there's a few probably differences when it comes to you're very limited with your shaders in games where you can be kind of like crazy with your shaders in like in animation and whatnot, and that might make a difference in modeling a little bit,
Right.
but not a lot.
Right. Okay.
Like, yeah, you're right. You're still going to want to have normal maps and all that kind of stuff.
Okay, cool. I'm glad I wasn't off in left field. But yeah, so for me, what I would do in this character next, which it seems like you've approached the end of the character course. So if you've got a retopologized mesh, I mean, that should be able to be brought into Substance Painter. But if you're trying to take all of your super high res details and export those out, yeah, I don't think many applications will accept an 8 million polygon export and import. But like, you know, you can do a lot just within Blender. I mean, Lampel, do you see like Substance being used at like 8K and above textures, like really high resolution textures?
You can't. It's not even possible. Like there's set resolutions,
Right.
and I think the highest is probably 8K.
Wow. Okay.
So you can't go above that.
8K is. Oh, let's see, Pavel. Question. I meant about texturing it after detailing the multi-res. Okay, perfect. Okay, that's kind of where I thought you would be at. So in that respect, you were, I think, trying to export then the multi-res details out of Blender and into Substance, which, I mean, you could just bake, if you wanted to really paint in Substance Painter, you could just bake those maps in Blender and then take those maps over to Substance and finish your painting workflow. But what my impression of Substance is that it's not really built for high resolution painting, and Lampel just kind of confirmed it. 8K still, in my opinion, is plenty for what I do with characters. But like the next option, if you want to go even higher quality, is I think Mari is maybe your only option. And that, I mean, they paint like 32K texture maps like for their characters, and in Weta, you know, Weta Digital uses that for all their characters, like really high res, high budget VFX films. So yeah, I mean, look into Mari. I guess I've never used it before, but I know that it's like the heaviest hitter in terms of raw power in texture painting.
Well, another thing that will be helpful in the future is when we have UDIM textures,
right.
Because then you could have one for the head, one for the body, and then you won't need to, I don't know, do all that like hoops to jump through.
Yeah, true.
To get like the right resolution in the right places.
Yeah, that's true. I really need to look into UDIM. Do you think it's coming soon to Blender?
I don't think in 2.8, but probably 2.81 or 2.82.
Nice.
Like it's been like partially implemented.
Okay. Ooh, wow, that's exciting.
Yeah, it's on the way.
Right. But yeah, like if you want to paint in Substance Painter, that would be my recommendation. Take the base mesh, the base level retopology over to Substance, bake out your maps from the high res in Blender, take those maps with you. And for me, I'm not a big hand painted texture person, so I always use those maps like ambient occlusion, displacement, like a what is it called, a dirty vertex color or cavity map. They're kind of the same thing. Maybe the pointiness node. Like take as much information from the high res geometry and use that to influence a base texture, whether it's a photo source skin texture, which would be my recommendation. And because the biggest thing that I recommend for the high poly texturing workflow is to make sure that there's a distinct connection from the texture and the geometry. For a long time, I never made those connections. I just did the geometry, painted a texture, all in and of itself, and they didn't quite blend together. And so when you make those geometry bakes like influence the texture, they go together a lot nicer. So yeah, that would be my recommendation. Continue to bake the maps. Anything in here I haven't talked about? So you've done that. Yeah, if you do decide to paint in Blender, I wouldn't necessarily count on Blender to visualize layered 8K maps for real-time painting. So, in 2.79, I assume we'll have something like it in 2.78. I haven't been able to do that yet. But where, you could like paint multiple diffuse textures. Like you could visualize them at one time if you set one to like a multiply, one to like an overlay. You could texture paint and see the result of the multi-layers. I'm not sure. I haven't done that in Blender 2.8, but I would imagine Blender would struggle with multiple 8K maps. So if that's the case, you might have to just go one by one. But I don't know. Maybe I need to do another course. I definitely need to do another course about a realistic head. I think do skin, do texturing, all that stuff. So don't have that now, but maybe one day I'll have a good course to point you to. And yeah, other than that, just Mari. But yeah, that's all I had. I mean, extremely impressive character. I hope you feel accomplished because you should. I mean, you're doing really good work. You have anything else, Lampel?
No, I think it looks really cool. And I like that skull mask. Like,
yeah,
it reminds me of the character that Jonathan Williamson did like way back in the day.
That's right.
Yeah, he had the like Unity.
Right. I forgot about that one. It does. This bird. I mean, this one maybe is a. I don't know if I'm not going to say that. I was gonna. Well, anyway, it looks really, really good here. Like extremely anatomically correct, even with that bird head. As if I know that much about bird anatomy. It just seems to look very accurate. Which is often more than not all you need. All right, so let's go on to the next one. Aston. Well, it's a car, but I think it's an Aston Martin. So I put that in front by Spiky XXX. You wanna?
Spiky, and I saw Spiky in here.
No, that's right. Spiky is in here.
Sweet. So okay, so Spiky says, I think it doesn't look too bad, but I personally wouldn't look twice at the picture. It doesn't get my attention. It just doesn't pop. I've rendered with Cryptomatte, so I can change just about anything, but I don't know what and how. Any critiques on the car model would also be welcome. Cool. So far, like, I don't know, right off the bat, car modeling takes a lot of time. So props for like getting it to this level, and it looks good. Like the reflections, none of them are like pinched or going in weird directions. Like it all looks very natural, especially near the front. Like it looks really sharp. So I think modeling is on point. The only part of the model that I wasn't sure about, and I'm not familiar with this car, so I could be wrong. I tried to look it up, but I didn't have like the exact name of it. But the grill in the front, the part that like goes into it looks like it's like a really thin piece of I don't know, fiberglass or metal or whatever it is, that like goes back like as if you could stick your like hand or something like in between that and the grill, and it makes it look really like flimsy, where most cars like the grill is kind of like built into that in a way, and that just goes straight back, and just looks like a hole, instead of like a covering. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
That's the only like modeling thing. Yeah. The rest of it I think would just be texturing. The shaders are looking pretty good, but I think it could definitely use some texturing. And I think we haven't talked about Omar's car yet. That's coming up. That's like an extreme example of I don't think you need to go that far, but adding a little bit of wear and tear, like not even just like hardcore scratches, like you don't need that, but some variation in the specular or the roughness would help. So even if you don't have it looking like dirt or anything, just have some areas of more roughness near the bottom and have it be shinier at the top or something like that. And then, yeah, like texturing the wheels and stuff would look good. But in terms of making it pop, probably finding another background would likely help. Since it is kind of like overcast, it's going to be a little bit flatter, but it does fit the environment, and also the camera angle is a little bit like I don't know. It's almost like somebody was like walking by and was like, "Wow, this is a cool car," and they like pulled out their phone and like took a picture of it, which can help it look somewhat realistic, but at the same time, it's not the same as like the like car advertisements or like the car photography that you're referencing in your description. Um, so probably getting a little bit lower, trying to keep it at like 90 degrees rotated, not going too far down or up. Um, and yeah, I don't know. I don't do a lot of car photography, so it's hard to say. What do you think?
I was actually going to say that the one note that I took away from this, the big note was exactly that. Like it looks like someone just took, like, saw the car outside and was like, oh, cool. You know, a car that I like, snap a photo and then go on their way. Like, it feels like that. And if that is the goal, which it's not usually the goal, most people want like you said, like a pop. And so you're not going to get the pop with that kind of scenario. Let's see if we can just like look up an example of like, by the way, he informed us, Spikey informed us that this is an Aston Martin DB2. So I'm going to look that up real quick. And he did say that the grill is accurate.
Okay.
But like, I'm with you, Lampel, that something in the grill space something doesn't read quite right. And I want to see if we can maybe find
Let's look up
an
that
example.
DB2.
So that's a decent picture, it seems like. Open image, a new tab. But I also wanted to look up like let's just look up sports car and see what kind of images we get.
What year is this? Because I feel like I'm not looking at the correct years like at all.
I think I found one. I don't know what year this is. Let's see if he said. I missed it. Oh, and the grill is okay. He didn't say what year it is yet. But I think I found one that's pretty close. And
Oh, I see now. I looked up the wrong thing. I misheard you. Okay, got it.
yeah, I mean the grill. Let's just look at that real quick.
Oh, you're right. It is accurate, and it does look a little bit funny on the car.
Yeah,
Now
the only thing maybe to me is that the edge around the grill, like the protruding grill space, you know, like it's a sharper edge, I think, on the car model than it is on the real car. The real car, I feel like it's just a little bit softer. There's a softness in the real car, I think, but I don't know. I'm getting a
sure.
little nitpicky. You're right that you've really come close, very very close to this model or the real car. I've never seen this car before, so learn something new. As far as the sports car and a sports car that pops versus one that doesn't, I looked up sports car and all of these are like studio photos. Here's a good example of like just I think a random car picture like that someone took with a whatever camera. Like the day is overcast and gray, it's bland, like the scenery is bland. Whereas, you know, you get something like this and the lighting is very intentionally designed to like make the car pop off. And there's a lot of resources for how to do that. I mean, I would just kind of Google like car lighting, you know, and start to do a little bit of research. But to make it pop, like, yeah, I mean, there's a whole science to it to actually make that happen. But currently, it's just like it looks like a snapshot, which is believable but doesn't pop, I guess, is the thing.
Yeah, I think while you're looking at that, a couple other things that could help is the sides of the wheels feel very like flat, and as I'm looking at these other Aston Martin pictures, they're kind of like rounded and more like puffy,
Yep.
and then flattened around on the bottom.
Yeah, that's true.
I think that would help. But also, yeah, some texturing there would go a really long way.
Texturing on the tires, absolutely. Man, Omar would be the person to talk about that. He's got that down to a really really refined science for sure. But yeah, break up on the what do you call it? The rubber material would be great. But overall, like really, really nice job on the model. I think the headlights look, I mean, basically perfect to me.
Good.
Yeah, like they're spot on. And yeah, the more I look at the model, the more I do realize you put a lot of attention into making sure that that was correct. And yeah, you did a great job.
Yeah, one thing that reads odd to me, and I'm not entirely sure what is causing it exactly. But if you look at the back tire and sort on the front tire as well, but as it goes into the shadow, it has this like white sort of rim to it or like reflection. And I'm guessing, if I had to guess, I think that you've put a white plane on the ground and then rendered that as like a shadow catcher, but it's still reflecting the white up into the car.
Mm-hmm.
So if you take that and then like texture it with the backdrop, just like using projection mapping or something, then it'll get those natural colors up and reflected correctly.
Yeah, that's a good catch. Yep, right there, that white reflection. Nice. All right, well.
Yeah, that looks great.
Yeah, it really does look good. Excellent job.
Really well.
Excellent, Spiky. Keep up the good work. Next, all right, we have apparently from Dragon Claw, DRG and CLW. If you're here, please, I hope you're here, because I find it hard to believe that this is your first character.
Can't call him BS.
It's gotta be this. I want to believe, because I've never seen anyone do like a first character like this. Maybe you meant first in Blender, maybe, but for just whatever. I'm going to read your background. I'm submitting my first character for an overall critique. I created some simple materials so that individual pieces are distinguishable. The orange piece is a gambeson. The dark blue one on top of it is a male shirt, and the brown one around the neck is also male. The lines at the end of the male pieces are going to be stitched leather bands. There are 2 on each arm of the shirt, and there will be fabric in between. The wrinkles on the clothing are not final. I will redo them properly after retopo. Okay, so I don't see, maybe Dragon Claw is not here, but yeah. So I think this is a very good model for in general, but especially for being a purportedly first character. But when I first saw it, I thought it was too simplistic. And I think the reason is because the materials are doing a definite disservice right now. I think it's just like viewport materials, and they're very low contrast. And so as I started to look into the model, I realized, wow, I believe it really is his first character. He usually does weapons and shaders. That's phenomenal. Because you got things right that almost everybody does wrong, which is most people get the proportions slightly wrong, like arms being too long, legs being too short, or torso being wrong. Maybe the one thing often is like the posture being like really, really stiff and unnatural. But you're not doing those things. And the wrinkles in the clothing look very believable. The boots look awesome. Yeah, there's really hardly anything for me to critique, honestly, and that's super impressive for being a first character. But yeah, the materials are, I'm looking forward to this being properly rendered and properly lit, because right now I think there's a lot more detail embedded that is being overshadowed by the simplistic materials. So yeah, it was kind of fun to dig in closer and realize, wow, this is a really good model. Let's see, what are my, so the note about the viewport shaders, the seam around the skirt garment, I think, could use a little bit of polish right now. It looks much more messy and kind of blobby than the rest of the model, the rest of the sculpture. So around this skirt area, this orange skirt, I would recommend just tightening that up, polishing it off a bit. But yeah, there's really not much else to say. I will say that it seems like very much a work in progress. Without much of an identity. Like the background, I don't necessarily know what this is for, if it's going to be animated or if it's going to be a game character, if there's a larger world. But right now I feel like it's lacking a bit of an identity, which I think helps a lot with characters, to give it a story. In the character, well, I guess I should call it the workshop. It used to be called class. the first exercise was to write a paragraph or two about like the backstory of your character, just to get into the space of your character being a real person that had life experience that shaped them and stuff. So if you haven't done something like that, at least ponder who this character is and where it came from, share that with us, and definitely continue the progress. But I'm looking forward to it gaining that more of an identity and properly rendered, properly lit, that kind of thing. As you get there, as you get down the road, I would strongly consider adding a pose and effective lighting. So that's kind of reiterating what I've already said, but a pose I think could help a lot. Usually in all character situations, like default T pose or A pose is kind of boring. But yeah, I mean, that's kind of all I had to say. Not too much to critique, honestly. Lampel, unless you have anything.
No, I mean, especially for a first character. And I know just because when I've attempted to do characters in the past, like I have the hardest time with faces. So I'm looking forward to that realistic portrait.
Excellent.
But that strikes me here as well, is like the face feels a bit unnatural. I couldn't tell you exactly why, but it doesn't feel quite right. But for a first character, it's still like good.
Right. I mean, as I look at it, granted it's a limited resolution image, but I think the material is not helping it for sure. But he posted, I believe, let me go check. I want to say, or drag he or she, I don't know. But let me see. I think they posted a link to their Sketchfab. Let's see if I can find that. Must be on page 2. Yeah, okay. Oh, yeah, there it is. Let's go take a look at that. You're doing the retopology now. And the retopology does look really good. It looks lower poly, so I'm wondering if it is going to be a game character. But in the face, like once I looked at the model, it looks pretty good in my opinion. Like I don't see anything in the retopology nothing like major proportionally wrong. So if there is any kind of wonky details in the sculpture, that's possible. But I thought the same thing. Like I wondered, is there something going on with the face? But as I zoomed into this, I was like, no, I think it's pretty good.
Nice. Okay. Yeah, it could definitely be the like. Yeah.
This default. I think it's like default Eevee lighting or workbench or something.
Now I'm seeing you zoom around the face on the.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. That looks good. Looks fine.
Yeah. So excellent work, Dragonclaw. Keep it up. I mean, if this is your first one, sky's the limit. I don't know why. It's just, I think as a character artist, I realize like it's so hard to learn this stuff. And if you're doing it right out of the gate, it's like, well, whatever. All right, let's
we learn from the best. That's fine.
All right, so Miranda Van Elst. Everyone knows Miranda in here. I know she's in here. Pretty sure, unless she left. Yeah, she's still there. So she has a huge project going on right now, and I'll read her background. I tried to summarize it a little bit, but she wrote more in the forum thread, so go look at that. It's very cool to see her like putting so much thought and vision behind this project. So definitely catch up on that. I'm working on a huge personal project to practice all the things I'm learning, which is creating my own game level. My main character is the son of what you would call futuristic blacksmiths. It's sci-fi themed, so his weapon of choice will be a spiced up sci-fi blacksmith's hammer. The hammer weapon is based on the shape of a real blacksmith's hammer. I'm going for a slightly stylized style with my game, cartoony look, but with real life scale, so no over exaggerated weapons and stuff. I want to have enough details to make it look visually interesting, but I don't want the design to be too busy. The whole game will have just enough detail to look interesting, but the focus will be on character animation, combat, and the story. Some questions I have. Is it sci-fi enough? How can I emphasize it more? Does it fit the stylized feel? How does the overall shape look? Do I need to change things to make it visually more interesting? Some parts look a bit empty. How can I spice those up without making it look too busy? I'm also not entirely happy with the big light in the middle of the hammerhead. It's just a huge light and it looks a bit boring to me. How can I make that better? The game will be in third person, so the weapon has to look good from that angle, but I guess that all depends on how the character will hold it. So how to test this out now, ? Any design flaws or overall critique and tips? So I think it's awesome that you're shooting so big with the game project. That's definitely like our hope and biggest dream for our members to be able to take our training and kind of be guided in that direction. So I think you're in the right place for that. Now, as far as your questions, I was thinking a lot about it, and I just couldn't come up with too much. And the reason I think is it's too early in the process, in my opinion, to where you mentioned is it the right style? Is it fitting what you described? And in your description, you did provide a couple links. Let me go find those. Here we go. This character you referenced, I think it's the only reference. But you reference this character as being within the style that you're shooting for. Let me zoom in a bit. And the big thing with this is I get a hand-painted kind of texture feel, which is very like common in games, like World of Warcraft. What else? Like mobile games a lot have this kind of hand-painted style where there's almost no shading going on. It's just pure diffuse material. So you're not seeing any metallic bits or varied materials. They're all just built into, it's like you took a painting of a character and just wrapped it around a 3D model kind of thing. It's not the more complex approach of this part's metallic, it's scraped off paint. It's none of that kind of thing. So with that in mind, with your hammer where it is right now, it's just solid colors, so we don't have any of that hand-painted aesthetic to it. And I think I think you're just not there quite yet. So the question of, is it sci-fi enough and how do I emphasize those things more? I think we'll only be able to answer those questions when we get to that point. Right now, it looks like a good sci-fi weapon. You provided other images as well. Like the design looks fine to me. It doesn't look bad by any means, but I guess I don't have enough information on what exactly this should look like. So it's hard to answer several of these questions. But the overall shape feels good, feels valid, feels like this could be wielded by, a third person character. But yeah, that was the big thing. Unfortunately, like, I don't feel like there's too much to critique because it feels like an early work in progress. And once we have things like the character or the world, I feel like you don't want to base the entire style off of this one weapon either. Like, you're trying to figure out the style as you go. So I would almost recommend like stopping here, maybe switch attention to the character, bring the character to this level, and then like develop that style over time rather than trying to define it with one asset right now. I don't know, Lampel, do you have any thoughts along these lines right now?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely like the idea of switching over to the character and like getting that kind of nailed down, and then matching this to the character rather than the other way around. I think that'd be a super good idea. In terms of design, like overall shape, I think the shape looks really cool. I like the shape. It looks sci-fi. It looks neat. And I think that would work well. And I don't know how large this is going to be in game, so I don't quite know what to say about like poly count or whatever, but it looks like it's pretty lightweight.
Mm-hmm.
The thing that really strikes me is that it feels like a toy. Like it feels like something like your kid would just like come into the room and start like hitting you with right now. Like,
don't get any ideas around. Yeah.
Like,
I agree.
Like. And I think that comes from like the coloring and the texturing and things like that, which can easily, well, not easily, but it can be fixed going forward. I don't think the model has any particular design flaws.
Yeah.
There's some weird shading now that I'm looking at the close-up on the like rings that are going up. There seems to be like a triangle or like some split things. I can't highlight it on this side, but do you see what I mean, Kent?
The grip you're talking. Oh, you mean maybe the metal little brackets?
Yeah, the metal brackets.
Yeah. Yeah. What is that?
I think it's just some edges need to be.
Oh, I see what you mean now.
At the moment,
I'll bet that's a mirror modifier that has a face right along the horizon, like where it symmetrizes.
Yeah, that could be.
Okay, Miranda's saying this is just look dev, and I think at a look, that's exactly what it feels like to me. It feels like look dev, and it's accomplishing that exactly. So you'll be able to answer these questions like the style once you go to the next step, like beyond look dev, I suppose. Um, but also, like if you, I think you're great about getting community feedback, and so it might help if we do have more source material, like a collage of style reference, so that we can, if you are going for this kind of thing, maybe incorporate this bit or that bit. I think you did say you've got more context about the game on your dev log. So yeah, I'm still, let's see, just a quick breeze through. I don't quite see a lot of images still. Getting the story and like game design and everything is super important, but just as far as answering these questions, I think it's hard to do at this point. But for look dev, you're right. You're on the right track for sure. You did ask about the light, because this piece in the middle, I guess, is an emissive material. It's a light source, and I mean, the first thing I would try is just with Eevee, like crank that emissive material up and add some bloom to it, because like that's what a light is kind of going to do. Right now, it doesn't even look like it's emissive. It just looks like a light blue color. Um, I'm trying to think. There were some other ideas. Let's see. That's going to be a
And
different.
that's a good point, because even if you are using this in a game, um, making the emissive very large, even the value, obviously you can't do that in like a normal PNG texture, but even inside of Unity, you can up that, and that's gonna be a big difference.
Mhm.
But with the colors, if you're going for, I mean, again, it depends on exactly what you're going for, but like it's it feels like a bit much to have like really saturated, like opposite colors.
That's a great point.
That just seems like there's quite a lot going on.
I think that contributes to the toy look that you were talking about, because we're in like primary color direction, which, you
Right.
know, if there was yellow, it would be
And
all
all of the
primary.
colors make up these like large chunks.
Mhm.
Um, and that also gives it the toy feel.
Agreed.
Um, so I'd probably just like hold off on coloring it at all, really, until the texturing phase, because that way you can try a whole bunch of different things and just kind of like see what works well.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's great advice. As far as the only other idea I had for the light source itself is that you could kind of take the approach sort of like a fantasy stone, you know, where they have like a gem with like a glowing source in the middle. I feel like there was one when I looked for ice material. I feel like there was a really, yeah, this one. So you could do something like this, where there's clearly an emissive object like in the middle, and kind of go for an effect like that. Still add the glow, you know, post process kind of thing. But if you wanted a little bit more intrigue than a flat, because it is a big surface, it's a significant chunk of the head, and if that thing is glowing, you know, it's gonna wash out a significant portion of your detail. So the second option, I think, would be to go for something like this, not ice necessarily, but like a clear glass with like a glowing orb in the middle or something like that. We have had a couple questions I've missed. I know Nathan asked one earlier. Let me get to that before I forget. Nathan, where was it? Here it is. Nathan Foster. Would it be possible to do a class on painting in Blender 2.8? Yeah, I think so. Definitely a texture class. You know, we're going to redoing our fundamentals, and that's going to include texture painting with 2.8. But yeah, I need to practice a bit before I teach like a hand painted course. I think that would be fun, but to do that with 2.8. So yeah, definitely count on that kind of content coming for sure. And then I think up at the top. All right, so Silent Heart, remember, oh, your question text so they can see it better. That means there must be a question down here. How do you add a sky or world background image to the 3D viewport? Concrescence, I'll do that real quick. So we'll just get rid of this world. Start from scratch. So this is what you should see in default cycles or Eevee, is this in the world setting, you know, you have this surface option, and where there's color, you click this button to add an environment texture. You should see it go pink. That's a good thing, because it means it's waiting for a texture that's not there yet. So go click an image, and you can go find an HDRI what is it called? Equirectangular image is what you're looking for. So if we look at these are HDRIs from HDRI Haven. Go there, download pretty much anyone that you want, and plug that into this place, to this spot, and then you'll get a world environment light. Okay. I think that's it for Miranda, but like, keep up the great work. Like, you're taking the right steps, you're outlining the project, you're at the look dev stage. So yeah, you're on the right track completely. And I look forward to seeing this progress. Next time we have a critique, I imagine we'll have some assets a little further along, maybe be able to answer those specific questions, or at least give you some feedback, on those specific questions. But definitely keep up the good work.
She did mention that those weren't the final colors. They're just showing that
They're
it's made
parts.
of different parts.
That makes sense.
And so in that sense, like, yeah, this looks great. And especially since, you're talking about like some parts feel empty and whatnot, but that's all going to be texturing too.
Yep.
Like, this looks ready to go forward as is, if that's the case.
Absolutely. I think if you mentioned a couple times not wanting it to be too busy. And I think if you did start to add more little doodads and that's not the right word. Greeble, is that the right word? Like little greebles things, little tiny details here and there. I think it would start to look too busy. So I think you've achieved a good amount of detail. Once you hand paint it, like isolate or emphasize the edges, kind of like we've been talking about with the edge detection, but this time you're not isolating it for other materials. You're just simply lightening or darkening the color. I think you're going to be pretty close to this kind of style that you referenced. So yeah, keep it up. I look forward to seeing progress on that. All right, the snowman sledding from Dragon Ice. Lampel, was that one yours?
On this one, says everything is done in Blender and rendered in Eevee. I wanted to make it look like from a children's cartoon. Still having problems with depth of field in Eevee. It's just not working for me. Also, I was trying to add some motion blur, but with no luck. In Cycles, everything is working, but it takes a very long time. Yeah, I can't help with the Eevee questions. I feel like sometimes it doesn't work. I don't know.
it's at that stage, yeah. Sometimes it just doesn't work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I really like the snow material.
Oh man, like, agreed.
That doesn't, especially near that like bottom left corner, looks really good.
I love the sparkles, like the little. You've got the right amount of sparkliness. Like, that could go wrong pretty quickly, but you've got the right amount of sparkles to feel a little bit fantasy, but also like registers that, oh, that's snow, or that's snow I want to be in, kind of vibe, which I think reflects what you said about a children's cartoon. Yeah, I love the snow shader.
Yeah, the thing that does feel off is the like really large, bright white section is the sky, and that's like super bright and also kind of distracting. But also, if the sky is like that bright, then the rest of it's going to be fairly bright as well. Whereas it feels kind of like dark-ish everywhere else. I don't know. The lighting just feels odd.
I know what you mean. Yeah.
Exactly put my finger on it, but like the snow is like very reflective. So if you go out in the snow, then everything's going to be fairly bright. And you still find some shadows like underneath the sled and stuff, but it'll be pretty soft.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. I'm trying to figure it out myself. I remember seeing this one, and there is something about the sky. Like, I would try and adjust the contrast, but still, you're just going to blow out the sky even more. Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, you might have seen me do this, but I'm like covering up the sky portion to see what it looks like without that, and I think it looks pretty good. So something about the sky. I mean, maybe a simple texture like could help. Even if it's that same trick where you like. Sometimes I really like the lighting on objects, but I don't like the way that the environment looks like after those adjustments. So I will keep that environment the way it is, but affecting the scene, and then the camera only sees whatever image I want to throw in there, or adjust the existing HDRI with the light path node. So it might be that kind of effect where you toss in an image of a sky, and then you maintain the same lighting. But I do something about the lighting I think is appealing. It's just low energy, perhaps, compared to the sky's energy. But I feel like there was something. You mentioned depth of field, problems with depth of field. So in Eevee, I'm pretty sure it only respect, like the only way I've gotten Eevee motion or depth of field to work. Let's see if I can do that really quick. Is with let's see if I add a monkey head. See if I can get it to work. Let's add several. All right, so if I want depth of field on this camera, look at that camera, lock camera to view. All right, let's see if I can't get some depth of field. Camera and focus object. Let's make it this one. Radius. I think, yeah, I think when I was working on the radius, no, that seems to work. 0.01. How about 0.2? Okay, yeah, that seems to be working fine. I typically would switch that to f-stop for some reason in Eevee. I remember using f-stop more often than the radius, but this seems to be working fine. But yeah, like 0.5 starts to get pretty blown out, or pretty depth of fieldy, like really strong. So anyway, yeah, I'm not sure what issues you were having, but
also
I wasn't
aware
using
that,
Eevee.
like, it's pretty much only going to yeah, either like blur the background quite a bit or the foreground. Like with this type of camera angle, I don't think it's gonna be both. Like I just remember messing with it a bit, and you have to get like some pretty particular values in order to get it to look good.
That's why. So I was using cycles like a goober. Now when I switch to Eevee, we do only have the f-stop value. That's why I thought that. So the only point of reference I have for this is like my wife has a pretty good camera that has like f-stop values. So I think like 1.8. Isn't that no? Yeah, I thought that was an f-stop value.
We got a question. Does depth of field exist in real life? I seem to experience it at times.
1.1. Wait, yeah. Why isn't the Eevee happen? Why isn't depth of field happening?
Let's see.
You
got your focus object.
Yeah, I'm not getting anything. I've done it before.
Try moving your camera like closer and farther away from the object.
So I should be focusing on this right one. Does anyone else know? Yeah, 1.0, 1.8, 2.8. That's what I thought. 1.8, 2.8. Ratio. Well, I kind of see where you were having problems, Dragon Eyes, because I cannot get this to work. And okay, well, Eevee. I don't know. It's a very weird time for us. Like sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. If anyone knows, let me know.
I can't remember.
Is the focus distance the problem? Focus distance. Well, it's grayed out right now.
That's just because it's using the object instead.
Yeah. So what if I turn that off?
Enabled in the render tab. That's a good point.
And
I think you turned that on.
I didn't. Thank you. That's got to be the issue.
Kalinex, save the day.
And then go back. Okay. Yeah, so like you have to go really low, like 0.1 f-stop in order to start seeing anything, which is, it's strange because I know my like wife's 1.8 or whatever, 1.4 gets like major depth of field. Anyway, once you get to 0.2, then we're starting to see stuff. So Dragon Eyes, as I bumbled my way through this, hopefully you got to have the depth of field enabled in the render settings. You've got to have f-stop really, really low. It starts at 128, which is, I think, perfect clarity. And then you have to go all the way down to like, I honestly don't see any difference until I get to let's see, 0.1, I see a difference. 0.2, yeah, but even from 128 to 1, I hardly see a difference, which seems crazy that there's 128 integers before you start seeing a difference. Anyway, thank you. We figured it out. Thank you. All right, so that's the depth of field. I'm not sure about the motion blur. I've never done motion blur with Eevee, but I assume with motion blur you do have keyframes like in front and behind, at least behind, so that you have like actual animation to calculate that. Without that, you're not going to get any motion blur, obviously. But anyway, whose is this? Okay, so I think that's it for this one. Again, like amazing snow shader, very convincing, very appealing, incredible snow shader. I love the detail in the sled path, like where the runners went. So yeah, excellent work here. The only thing we were kind of bumped about was the sky, if I remember correctly.
What's the sky? Yeah. And what would you say about the character?
Oh yeah,
It's kind of like the main point of it.
That's true. Immediately the head kind of looks detached, I suppose. Like it looks like the head is kind of detached from the head. Okay, so Dragon Ice, you have done that stuff with the depth of field and it's still not working for you. Oh, I don't know. I guess just chalk it up to it being a work in progress engine right now. Yeah, motion blur is a separate thing to enable. Yeah, I don't know. The character, I think the pose could be a little bit clearer. Like maybe switch the arm position to where the arm that's in the back visually is actually brought up and it's holding onto the rope, and the other one is, the one arm closest to the camera is back. That way he doesn't cover up his head. I think that could help just sort of kind of mirror the pose in the character's like x-axis, I guess. I just feel like it's kind of obscuring currently what's going on, maybe not reading quite as clear. But other than that, I mean, it doesn't strike me as too odd or anything. The rope, Dragon Ice looks off. I think so too. In this situation, you would want the rope to be extremely tight, like taut, I guess. So the fact that there's a little bit of a curve here, I think doesn't emphasize that this is a rope that's being like pulled really tight, being dragged by this character. Also, for a little bit more emphasis, maybe you could kind of decrease the rope's thickness as it goes back toward the hand. You know, like when you take a rubber band and you pull it and it gets thinner and thinner and thinner. Not that a rope would do that, but it would emphasize like this sense of speed, I guess, if that's what you're going for. It would need to be fast in order for the character to fly up like that. So I like the material a lot. I think that on the wood, I think that reads pretty well.
It's also just like a fun idea.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. Yeah, good stuff. I think we'll probably need to move on. We're running out of, we have about 10 minutes.
So, oh boy.
Yeah, let's go on to the Tomb Robber by Mal Holmesy. So, I mean, this is phenomenal work. This is very, very good. Mal Holmesy, let me read your background first. I told you I want to go pro as a character artist. I was playing with Blender for 4 years, and I started to take it seriously after the stylized character class, so I want to thank you. I feel comfortable with the tools, sculpting, texturing, and I know anatomy well. I'll love to hear your critique and if you have any advice. The character is on my Polybook thread. The concept is from Chris Walton. Well, I mean, if that class inspired you to take it serious and try to go pro, that means a lot to me. So, and I'll be honest, I think you have what it takes without a doubt. Like this character work, I would be proud to have it on my portfolio. I mean, you're there. You're hireable without a doubt. So I mean, congrats! Like yeah, I remember you you've taken more than one class, I believe, and I remember your work, and you just improved and improved and improved. And I mean, this is incredible. From the fact that you have so much detail in the gravestone and in the coffin, you've filled out the scene. He's in a pose. The lighting is impactful in both of these renders. Like you've got the full package now, and yeah, you're hireable without a doubt. And I can't remember. Yeah, there you are, Mal Holmesy. I mean, keep up the good work. I expect to see you hired soon if you continue. Now, the only real critique I had whatsoever. Uh, oh, another point. You mentioned that the art is from Chris Walton. That's another thing that's going to work really well for you because professionally, a lot of people want their idea on paper to become 3D, and your ability to translate that into an authentic 3D version is going to be great. That's going to be a very strong asset in your tool set. Yeah, the only critique I had is that the hands to me don't quite feel like they're gripping the shovel, especially, but even the lantern. So if we look at the art, you can see that the hand pose is a little bit different. Whereas in your pose, it kind of looks like a toy. You know, when you had like action figures that could hold a weapon or something, like their hand is in a constant, pose like this. That's what it looks like to me. It doesn't look like he's like realistically resting his hand on the shovel or even gripping it. And the lantern is not as much of a problem. Like it does look like he's holding on to the lantern, but I prefer the artwork angle. I think that just, I don't know, it feels more natural, just is I think a better angle for whatever reason. But I mean, honestly, that was one thing. And then the only other one I had, two more actually. I'm surprised I had so many notes. The lantern in this render, and maybe the other one too. Yeah, in both renders, I think the lantern flame could be a lot brighter and could be like, have some effect on it, like a bloom at least. I think that would just help to push it a little bit further. Right now, it's kind of it looks like a fake candle. You know how you can buy those candles that are fake. You just like turn a switch on. It kind of looks like that. Whereas, I don't know, just a little touch would be to make it look brighter. And then this is more of a suggestion, kind of my taste, is currently the background, while it does not look bad whatsoever, I think it looks fine. You've got this scene going on with the gravestone, the dirt, the piles of dirt behind him. Like it looks like a good opportunity to use a kind of forest background, like a blurred black and white kind of forest image as a backdrop, just to complete the scene a little bit. Right now, the background doesn't seem to emphasize or support the rest of the scene, so it's a super minor picky note, but that could maybe just complete the context a little bit more. But like, I mean, seriously, like this is phenomenal character work. I would absolutely be proud if it were mine. Lampel, do you have anything?
I really don't.
It's great work. It is great work. Let me see. Yeah, that's a good question from I think Lord Humongous. So were all the things in here sculpted, or are some of the surface details from bump and normal maps? I would imagine
It's all sculpted.
I would say sculpted. Even if he baked them down to normal maps, still he like sculpted that detail. But maybe you're asking like, is it geometric detail or is it bump map? Yeah, I see what you mean. All sculpture. Fantastic. I mean, it's very easy as a character artist to not take this kind of time on because I don't think let's see, the artwork. Yeah, the artwork doesn't even have a gravestone. It doesn't have a casket. So you went above and beyond, and it's very easy to like do those things halfway. Once you have your character done, it's like, the main portion's done. I'll just haphazardly throw these other assets in there. But you didn't do that. Like you went all out on those assets. They look great. Yeah, it's awesome. Cool. Well, keep up the good work. I expect to see big things from you, my Holmesy. Keep it up. Next, we have Omar and your Toyota Vitz repair bay. I'll let Lampel start this one.
Sure, I'll read the background. So I've been updating some of my old renders and trying to get them to portfolio quality. I modeled a Toyota Vitz for one of Kent's classes last year, and here's my attempt in trying to get it to the next level. Also, one of the advice people give is to try to make all of your renders tell a small story. So I hope I kind of accomplished that. And I think you did. This is really banged up. But the contrast with like the super clean, like sci-fi, it's really interesting. Honestly, when it comes to like texturing the car and the modeling, I don't have much to say. Like, what do you think, Kent? Like,
I think it's amazing. I think it's really really good.
just looks good.
Yeah, I love like you went with this extremely scratched texture, which I feel like could is a risk. Like it could look poor if not done correctly, but you've isolated the you've centralized the detail, the scratches in appropriate spots, and it's not overdone either. So it makes a lot of sense. I think it just reads extremely well, and the exaggeration of like how banged up this car is has really paid off, and the result is fantastic. I mean, the detail of he's got more renders I can share. Yeah, the detail of the gritty, grimy windows. Love that. The tires. I mean, I've never seen better tires than this. Like you had tires earlier in another render that looked phenomenal. So you've got the tire thing down. Like, yeah,
Yeah,
they're
that's
perfect.
really good.
Yeah. Now, and you mentioned the story. I actually love what you did with the story. The fact that there's this repair bay concept, which with these like animatronic robot tentacles that work on the car. You've got Repair Bay 7 on the background, but it's all pretty neutral. Like it adds to the scene, but clearly the point of the overall render is the car, and that's without dispute. So the background is not distracting, it is supporting, and that can sometimes be tricky to do. So I like that you use the white. You have implemented that story concept, and it just leaves me thinking, like, on top of all the cool modeling and texture work, it's like, what is this old car doing in this futuristic kind of repair bay? I'm intrigued, and it leaves me with a sense of interest. So I think you've just struck the right balance, exactly how they needed to be done. Yeah, amazing work. It was Omar. That was my first car. I swear, when I sold it, it didn't look like that. Um, did you use your own car for reference? That's awesome. Yeah, man, I have nothing whatsoever negative to say at all.
McCall said she would break the windows, and that would be cool.
That'd be a nice touch. Like kind of crack
if
the
like
windows, or you mean
just
like
like
bust them
one
out?
or two of them were like, cracked. That'd be pretty sweet.
I agree. I agree. Um, yeah, yeah, totally. That would be cool. It would be the cherry on the cherry on top, because this thing is, yeah, I think it's just phenomenal. Yeah, it's something that it's such a high level of detail that I can just stare and stare and stare. Awesome work. I'll stop gushing over it. Yeah, great job, Omar. I love that you and Malholmesy are both trying to go pro. Without a doubt, I think you have what it takes, and you're right there. Like, you're both very hireable, which would be awesome for us. We would love to see that happen. Feel very very good ourselves. But oh man, I just noticed like the front the headlight looks great. I think headlights are pretty complex in my opinion, because you've got the outer shell and then all this intricate reflective stuff going on inside. So anyway, it looks really good, and it's something I've never attempted. Is it portfolio worthy? Yes. Like, do you have to ask that question at this point? Like, of course it's portfolio worthy. Um, this is the last thing I want to say about you, Omar, because when I saw this and I saw that you added this story, and I know you're working on a portfolio. I personally think that the most powerful form of a portfolio is just a quick 2-minute demo reel, something like something quick that grabs the attention, rather than a document necessarily. But it made me think of this demo reel from Peter Sinatra in 2006. This is one of the first ones I saw that blew me away, and I wanted to play that for you because I think your work would fit into this kind of thing. So let me play this real quick. And I mean, maybe you've already seen it before. So yeah, Omar, I think you've got work that could fit that kind of format. It's a very quick demo reel if you think about it. Gets right to the point, but it's also oh, I don't want to lose this. What? But it's also what was I trying to say? Um, so, for example, with this car scene, the fact that you've got this environment, like you can start to do some simple camera moves, some like editing to match music, but like you've got all the ingredients that you can make a thrilling reel. I know that you have that hovercraft vehicle too, and you could put that into a scene because what's great about that reel is he's doing so much with the little bit that he has. It's not a little bit. Especially some of the scenes are crazy, like the bathroom crashing through the floors. That's crazy. But like this scene right here at the beginning, the fact that he's got this where is it? Yeah, it's a pretty simple still frame image, but he has that little bug crawling. He's got the depth of field, transitioning from background to foreground. But it makes for an entertaining clip, and it's kind of an animated still frame. And the subway is another example. Anyway, I think that if you can come up with a reel like this in the work that we've talked about that's in your portfolio right now, like people would be crawling over each other to hire someone like this. So I think this kind of reel is incredibly powerful if you want to go pro. But anyway, I saw your work and I thought of that, and I'm like, I got to show him. So it would be better to make the portfolio a video, not necessarily animation, but at least some motion to the renders. Yeah, that would be my recommendation. And you and I can talk about this later. But yeah, like, because you've done these renders and you've done several angles, but like just imagine that these are just slight camera angles, and then you've got like, so depending on the type of music you want to use. In that case, the edit went beautifully with the song, and so it's energetic. It's like enthralling. After it was over, I had to like remind myself, oh yeah, that was a technical demo reel, like of someone showing their skills. I just thought it was a cool video, while I was watching it. But like these angles, you could totally do something like that, and seeing the reflections off of the car and off of the ground, like that's just going to look beautiful. But anyway, we could talk more about that if you have any more questions. I would put more emphasis on a quick video reel than I would on like a document, like a PDF or something. So that's my opinion. We should do a whole stream about like demo reel stuff and how to like prepare your portfolio. We've been wanting to do that for a long time, but need to get our poop in a group. All right, let's go on to the Valkyrie sculpt from Silent Heart. Yes, I think we only have a couple more. Yeah, just a couple more.
Yeah, 2 more after this.
Wow, we've already been doing this for 2 hours. I didn't realize that. All right, we'll keep going. Maybe try and expedite it a little bit. So it is another character, Silent Heart, from Silent Heart. So some of what I've already talked about should be applicable. But let's read your background. I'm attempting a Sketchfab challenge right now, and I thought it would be a good excuse to practice some female anatomy. So big question: how is my anatomy? Well, we all know how much of an expert I am at anatomy. We went over that last week, but. Like overall, it's good. You're approaching a very solid level of detail and refinement to the sculpture that often I feel like is overlooked. So you've got the skills, the polishing skills, especially. I think it obviously reads as a human. The head to me looks almost perfect. Like this angle right here of the head, especially, I'm like, that's spot on. So the head is one of the hardest parts, I would say. So you've clearly refined your head sculpting skill. The big, and by the way, this is her art. This is Silent Heart's art. And let me see, where did I go with that? Okay, yeah. Let me talk about some of the notes. The isolated, inconsistent muscle definition. So if you look at the abdomen, upper arms, knees, and calves are especially defined next to the rest of the body. So if it were, it just looks like they're kind of tacked on. So like the abdomen looks like, I don't know, bits of clay or something tacked onto the body. And it doesn't look like the rest of the muscles have inherited the same kind of refinement or definition. So that makes it look a bit inconsistent. And I would say you need to either kind of commit to a very muscular lady or kind of tone it back to be just a fit lady. And I think I have an image that I was using. Where is that? I think it's this one. Yeah, okay, so I was looking up kind of a generic female model, and this is an example where if you look at the kind of pelvis area, this to me looks like yours. You know, it's got a very similar level of detail. You've got the hip bones prominent, just like prominently realistic like you see over here, but the abs are not nearly as defined as yours. And so this to me reads like an appropriately fit level of definition. Whereas you look at the knees too, and that definition is definitely there, but it's not quite as sharp as it is here. So right here is just standing out as being too defined by comparison. And so that is a general note. Abdomen, what else did I say? The upper arms too, you have like really defined bicep definition, but not other muscles necessarily. So again, like I would say commit to a more kind of bodybuilder type woman, or tone it back to something more like this to be just a fit but not overly toned muscles. Let's see what else. Again, there's this thread on several of the characters where there's a stiff posture to where she doesn't look relaxed at all. She just looks like at attention. And I think that's just not the right way to go about a neutral pose. You can always animate stiffness later or pose stiffness if you really want it, but I don't think it should start that way. Oh yeah, and her breasts to me feel kind of attached. It's a similar note as the abdomen. They just look kind of tacked on rather than incorporated into the torso anatomy. And you can see that again in this image. So if you follow the silhouette of the abdomen, you can see that it kind of cuts backward into the chest cavity. Right here, this line cuts backward, and it doesn't continue straight up to the armpit, right? Like that's not a straight line. Whereas with yours, it is more of a straight line, or even a convex shape. So you have the top of the abdomen, and it kind of rounds backward towards the armpit. And so when you add the breast into that, it feels like it's on top of a mesh rather than on top of a surface rather than incorporated into it. So I think it's very distinct with this image that the breasts feel like they are incorporated inward. There's almost like a cavity, like where the breasts fit and where they fill out. Did that make any sense, Lampel?
I think so.
Okay. Hopefully that did. There was, I think, something else. Oh, right. From the front angle, the upper arm is bowed outward. So let me get my little pointer. So they're kind of bowed this way, like they're pointed out, which it should just be straight. It's like a bow leg, but for an arm, which I don't know I've ever seen that before. So I would just kind of move these biceps and the meat of the upper arm. Let's see. I would move it down a little bit. And then one final note. I know you said that this contest was kind of a good excuse to practice female anatomy, which is, if that's like your main goal, I think that's completely fine. But if you are, trying to compete in the competition, just remember that since she's going to be clothed, don't spend too much time where it won't be seen in the end. So like the definition doesn't have to be perfect. Like these abs, like they're not going to show up in a costume like this. So you just ballpark it. You don't need to be so refined. So yeah, in other words, don't hinder the overall project to perfect anatomy that won't be seen in the end. Maybe if this project is more an excuse for you to practice anatomy, then keep with that. But if you want to finish the overall character, then maybe simplify your current anatomy and just expect it to be covered. I'm planning for the breast to be sitting in clothing already, so maybe exaggerated the form. Yeah, I mean, uh, is it exaggerated? Maybe a little bit exaggerated, but I just feel like I've seen that more where like real breasts are just incorporated more into it. I don't that's the only word I can really come up with. Um, so I don't know. The pose of this lady as well, I think, is much more relaxed. Obviously, the arms are lowered, but just the way her posture is, it's good posture and it's relaxed posture. So I would take a note from Eugene Foken up here. Um, does a pretty good job. All right, I kind of blasted through that one. Do you have anything, Lampel?
No, I don't have anything to add to that.
Okay.
We can go on to the next one.
Yeah, we'll go to the next one. Keep up the good work, Silent Heart. Again, like what I want you to leave with is the fact that you're refining the shapes. The shapes themselves could use a little bit of work, but your level of refinement is very good, and that's gonna be great once the shapes are there fully. All right, next. The Forest Road by Philip Capone.
Yeah, here's the nature scene I'm making to practice plants and texturing. I'm going for photorealism. I'd like a device to make the scene blend together and have more sense of a real place and less of the feeling of a bunch of different objects stuck together. And that's definitely like the main challenge in making these sort of like outdoorsy scenes, is having it not feel like a bunch of stuff stuck together. The main thing I noticed like right away that doesn't really have to do with the plants or anything is just like the sharp diagonal line where the road sort of ends. And I can't really tell what exactly is going on there. Like it looks like maybe like just a sharp hill, or I don't know what that is. Are you seeing that differently, Kent, or is that also?
No, I do see like right behind the tree, it's like the terrain kind of shoots up. But I'm kind of filling those gaps in because you can't actually.
Oh,
Wait,
okay.
is that what you're saying?
I just realized I was looking at this like I didn't even realize that that was a tree that was like over the road. I saw that as like it was like a different part of the hill, which was like really messing with my mind. Okay, so once you said tree, I see that much better now.
Oh, you kind of thought it was a hill, like the crest of a hill going down, and then you saw
Yeah,
another hill behind it. Yeah, I can see where you kind of got that from. It's like one of
that's
those
really
3D puzzles that you have to see what, is. That's what it reminds me of.
yeah. Um, so I guess I mean the only thing that would help that to like show the form of what's what would definitely be lighting. Like it is fairly flat, and so having it be clearly showing the forms of the trees, I think would get rid of any confusion there. But in terms of like plants, like the plants themselves are looking pretty good. I don't think there's like a ton that you need to worry about individually. Maybe adding some subdivision surface to the like more leafy ones that are looking kind of like low poly. But I mean, these are really tricky things to get right. The grass looks like really fuzzy, and that's again like another really tricky thing that like takes forever to tweak. Um, but what you can do is kind of have like a layer underneath that is more fuzzy, like you have it there, and then have another particle system or another couple particle systems of like taller grass that bends over and is much more like thick and kind of like sharp. So you have like the fuzzy underneath and then like the sharp, like razor sharp looking stuff on top, and kind of mix that all together, and that will definitely help. Texturing things a bit differently, like giving it a large noise texture so that not all of the grass is the same color. So there's like patches of drier grass or like patches of different things would help. And also adding more like medium-sized plants like in between. So you have like the super small grass and then the taller plants. And I think the fact that there's like nothing growing in between there is what's giving it the effect that it's kind of like just stuck together. You kind of have to have more. Like it seems weird that adding more things will make it less messy, but I think that's the case.
Yeah, with nature like this, that's probably true.
Yeah. Um, Only other things, let's see. The ivy is looking like really dark
Hmm.
on that.
To me, it almost looks like there's not. I mean, if I look closely, I think there is a texture on the leaves, but at first glance, it looks like just a dark green, diffuse material was kind of added to the ivy.
Oh yeah.
Whereas another general note, I think some translucency on all of the plants, I think would help it look a little more natural and less like fake plants, artificial plants.
Yeah.
Sorry, I think I interrupted you. What were you going to say?
Oh, no, he didn't. Um,
Okay.
but I think lighting would be a huge thing here.
Hmm.
Um, like we looked at in the other render, what works really well is like layering like splotches of lighting. So if you have some directly on the path, and then maybe it gets like darker under the tree, and then maybe it's brighter on the other side of the tree, or just something like that. Putting like a tree over off to the side, so as the light comes down, it kind of like creates cool shadows and stuff.
I think that's a very
Oh,
valid point because it does feel so lush. Right now, there's no shadows from above, which implies like around this area, there's no tall trees or anything like to block the sun. Um, which does kind of like maybe it would give it more context, um, given that it is so lush. I guess that obviously a tree fell down. There's another tree on the right side, so I feel like there should be more trees. That like maybe I feel like plants don't really grow like this in the open that much, or is that not accurate? What would you say?
I mean, some do. If they do, they'd be like pretty like clustered together, which they
Okay,
kind of are here.
yeah,
Um, so
yeah,
I don't know.
okay. The only notes I have are some of the larger weeds like these that are growing above the grass, like in the grass but are taller than the grass, are fairly low poly. You can see that in certain places like very distinct jaggedness, and kind of segmentation in the leaves, so that you're like right on the edge of it being believable but then ruining the illusion with being able to spot stuff like that. So if you can increase a subdivision surface modifier, perhaps that could help. Um, and then the only other thing is like this path seems particularly man-made to me, whereas nothing else does. So it's like I really like that I love the way when I first saw it, I loved the way that the grass grows less and less in the crevices. I really like that. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but contextually, it's like this is a kind of a fancy path in the middle of a forest, kind of an overgrown forest, which yeah, it just seemed out of place. Whereas if this was more like a rocky, like nature path that people have walked over and over, and so it's like rather than pavers, it's like a dirt path with rocks. I feel like that would be a little bit more contextually makes sense. But on the other hand, if you're going for like, well, this belongs in a Mayan ruins kind of thing, uh, I can buy into that. But I would want to see more Mayan ruin evidence, not just the path. Like maybe a crumbled statue head, or some crumbled architectural building blocks, like stuff like that. But there is a juxtaposition right now between the man-madeness of the path and the overgrown natural quality of the vegetation to me.
But I love how the grass kind of like shoots out around the
I do
rocks.
love that.
That just looks so cool. So I think I don't know. I like the juxtaposition.
Okay, yeah,
And
it doesn't bother you at all.
now,
Okay, well, I like that. I think the grass. I've definitely seen grass that grows like that, very very thick, especially new grass. If you've ever planted grass for the first time, it tends to come up like this, but not usually over time. I feel like, so to your point, like a little different style of grass, I think would be good. Um, but yeah, I mean, overall, like it has the same kind of, I think, affirming qualities of qualities worthy of commendation, that it's very detailed. You have a lot going on in the scene, which is definitely required for a lush vegetated scene like this. So excellent work there. Just maybe keep going, keep refining things. Yeah, that's all I've got. Let's see. I think, okay, last one from Wilco. All right, the print resin sculpture. My main goal, from Wilco speaking, my main goal was to practice sculpting. It is meant as a kind of stylistic but still rather realistic little statue. I modeled the cloth right on the model because when I started, I wasn't sure if I should model them that way or separate, as it is a statue. And it's meant to look like one piece, even though it has different parts. The head, the hair, the left arm are separate from the rest of the body. Oh, okay, cool. I didn't really get that. Nice. I want to know if the anatomy is correct or what could be better. How I can improve the shader. The shader is so fuzzy. I lose too much detail. I had to use an AO node to bring back some of the sharp detail. I have not retopologized the model yet. Is this preferred? Is this preferred if this was the kind of style I want to go for? Would the render times be faster? I do not want to improve. I do want to improve the model. I'm just curious if this could be accepted as an end result. Well, if it can be accepted as an end result, absolutely. Like there's no reason to retopologize this if you don't want to turn it into an animation friendly character. Like if this is just a sculpture, yeah, leave it at that. Like don't leave it as the dynamic topology mess. That's fine. You know, as long as it looks good and it renders good. I don't think you'll save that much time in the render, especially if you calculate how much time you'll spend retopologizing, because you'll need to deneutralize the model, or you'll need to neutralize the model, retopologize, and then possibly quickly rig it back into pose like you have it here. So I would say forget that. If this is your end goal, this can absolutely be the end goal. The anatomy, I think, is really, really good. And you provided your scene. So let me open that. Open recent. I think it's this guy. And it does take a moment to open. It's a pretty dense file. If anyone is staying for the quiz at the end, I don't have one today. So if I see viewership drop significantly, I understand. But I know that's kind of a thing we've been getting into the habit of doing. I did not do it today. But all right, so we've got our file here. And I think the anatomy is quite good. I really focused in on the hands. I think the hands are great. They're burly, like they feel like he's like a lumberjack. He uses his hands a lot. So which is not a bad thing, but it definitely reads realistic. The only anatomy note that I really had was the length of the forearm, of his forearm here, seemed a little bit long on just his left arm. And I wanted to check that if we use our measuring tool, which I haven't really used yet. Is it right click? Let's see, measurement tool. There we go. And if I hold control, I can connect it to the elbow. So from wrist to elbow, we're looking at 0.415. So 0.4, let's just say 0.42. On this side, over here, .31. If we maybe there's some twist in the elbow, 0.33. So yeah, we're looking at like, what is that? That 25% shorter. On the other side, which I think his right arm looks natural, but this looks a little bit long. So in other words, I guess I would kind of shrink the elbow. Let me see if I can jump into sculpt mode. And it's definitely pretty dense. Really dense, but that's okay. Man, it's actually it's hard to work with. I don't know how you made it this far, but yeah, I might decimate that, in fact.
Is that multi-res or is that all dynamic?
I think it's dynamic, if I remember. Let me undo. Let me just reload the file. It takes too long. All right, forget it. Let's take a look. Yeah, I think it's dynamic topology that has a, what's it called? A decimate modifier applied. Yeah, so we're able to zoom around the scene very efficiently, but it's because of the decimate. So if I apply the decimate modifier, And Wilco, I feel like you are in here. Oh yeah, you are here. By the way, you said you're here. And okay, so now that that's applied, what I would want to do is sculpt the elbow, push it higher like this. Anyway, so yeah, I would. That's the only kind of anatomy thing. Besides that, I feel like the cheeks in the smile could actually come back a bit. I think I need to do the same thing. Apply the decimate. But with a smile, sometimes I see people, emphasize a horizontal like movement for the corners of the mouth. But in a smile, the corners of the mouth go back significantly too. So that's what I would do here. I would push the corners of the smile back, smooth this out a little bit, maybe inflate. Whoops. Yeah, so the smile right now just doesn't, like, the anatomy of a smile is like it's tightening, stretching your lips across your teeth. So like your lips are going to deflate slightly, they're going to lose some volume, and they're going to thin out basically. So I would, right now it doesn't look like any of that's happening, so I would kind of deflate the lips a little bit. I mean, we're talking pretty subtle stuff, but like this was the only other thing that I kind of, my attention was drawn to. So pulling the smile back a bit, I think will make it look a little more natural. Puffing out the cheeks so we really get that emphasis of the corner of the mouth being pushed back. So it's a subtle change, but overall, like, your anatomy is really good. The only other notes you talked about, improving the shader. So I believe you followed the print resin shader forge lesson, and it looks brilliant. Like, it looks really good and in line with that shader in that lesson. But by nature, you are going to lose a little bit of detail because there's translucency going on. So you could deepen some of your crevices. Like, I know in the pants you definitely lose some detail, but if you deepen some crevices and emphasize your wrinkles a bit more, I think it'll look more realistic and it'll show up better in the material. You can also, I had a few things I thought.
Also, depending on what you're using, I know that if this is mostly like subsurface scattering in that, is it translucency or is it subsurface scattering?
Man, I can't remember off the top of my head. It might be both. I think it's at least subsurface scattering.
Okay, if it is, then that's what the random walk is for.
Oh yeah,
is for bringing it back those details.
Great point. I haven't even really used the random walk, but I've seen videos, and yeah, you're spot on. Yes, absolutely do that. I had a couple. Oh yeah, you have a turntable. Let's watch that. Forgot about that part. Yeah, I mean, I think the turntable, I like the actual that you put a zoomed in version on the left and a full version on the right. I think that's a cool way to present it. So yeah, I mean, good work. Excellent. As far as notes, oh yeah, we talked about double checking the left forearm. You could also go for more dramatic lighting, right? So less fill light in the scene can also bring back some of your details. I think, was I going to say something else? I can't remember, but you could use pointiness as well. Use the pointiness attribute from the geometry node that can kind of bring back, highlight some of your details. And then you said you were using AO, I believe, in your shader, but deeper crevices, stuff like that. Yeah, and the random walk. So those things you should try and see if your detail comes back the way you remember it in the sculpture itself. All right, I think that is it. Yeah, that's all for today. That's all the critiques. Man, that lasted an hour and a half, or 2.5 hours. I did not expect that. But yeah, a lot of good work, a lot of things to talk about. And it's also been a while. Too. Say that again.
All good stuff.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, high quality work in this critique. So thank you guys. I do not have a quiz today. And man, I'll say last thing I'll say is like I told you I was going to take March off and not stream. Lampel, you're going to stream next week, I believe.
I think, yeah, I've got one next week.
Okay, yeah, it looks like a cool one. The things you should not use Eevee for, which I think is a good topic. But I was planning on not doing any in March and then streaming or recording the Blender 2.8 courses. But now, like, you know, there's the writing on the wall seems to be, well, we know now that the scheduled home, what is it called? Like the workshop for the development crew to push 2.8.
Oh, yeah, like home stretch.
Home stretch, that's what it is. Yeah, that's apparently coming, or that's in the second week of April. So that already pushes the 2.8 release till after that at least. All that to say, we're starting to see writing on the wall that 2.8 is going to be pushed back even further. So I don't know. I don't know exactly what's going to happen with the streaming versus the recording, but stay tuned. Miranda, I did talk to Gonzo, and he's going to start scheduling some Unity streams for March at the very least. So anyway, yeah, we got stuff coming for you. But just so you are aware. Awesome. All right. Thank you guys very much. We will finally let you go. Thanks for sticking around. And thanks for submitting all the excellent work. We love to see you guys progressing the way you are. So keep sharing that work with us and have a great rest of your Tuesday. Thank you, Lampel. That was a lot of fun.
Yeah. See y'all later.